Hello, my name is William Cario. I'm Senior Vice President of Academics here at Concordia University, Wisconsin. When I get a chance, I also teach some history here and there, and I've been doing that for about 20 years here at Concordia. The purpose of this session is to introduce you to faith and learning here at Concordia, and I have two goals for our session. One is for us to examine Concordia's institutional stance about faith and learning. And the second goal is to begin to explore how we as instructors can integrate faith and learning into our classrooms in appropriate ways. Our mission really drives us here at Concordia, and the mission lays out, I believe, three major implications for teaching and learning here at our institution. First of all, we believe that a Christian and particularly Lutheran perspective gives value to a student's education. That's one of the ways in which our education is distinctive here. We recognize that a Christian perspective gives value to all students' education. Second of all, we believe that a Concordia education prepares people in a holistic way. The mission statement identifies that we prepare people in mind, body, and spirit. And the idea of that holistic way of looking at the world is also a value added to our students' education. And then finally, the mission emphasizes the idea of vocation or calling. Concordia has a calling, and its calling is to help our students, whether they're older or younger, whether they're traditional age, or if they are students coming back to school after a long time, whether they're on campus, on the Mequon campus, or off campus, whether they're taking classes in a face-to-face manner or in an online format, to help them find their callings, their vocations in the world. There are several Lutheran doctrines which I believe help shape Concordia's understanding of its mission. And those two doctrines come from Martin Luther. The two doctrines that I just want to spend a couple of minutes talking about are the two kingdoms doctrine and the doctrine of vocation. We'll spend a little bit more time with that. Let's start with the doctrine of two kingdoms. Martin Luther tried to explain how God worked in his world with the doctrine of two kingdoms. And the definition, a short definition that we'll work with, is the fact that as Luther explains God's presence in his world in two different ways, not completely separate, but distinctive, yet working together. According to Luther, God works his will in this world by two different means, or what he calls two different kingdoms. And Luther defined them described them as the kingdom of the left and the kingdom of the right. The kingdom of the left, according to Luther, are the institutions by which God provides for his whole creation. God created the world and established any number of institutions by which the world is kept in order and kept running and kept productive. Therefore, institutions such as the family and governments and economic systems and businesses and schools and non-government organizations are all means by which God helps to preserve our creation for the good of people and for the good of all creation. The kingdom of the right is the institution by which God continues to redeem his whole creation. Through his Son, Jesus, God redeemed the world, and he brings that redemption to his creation through the church, that invisible church that Luther talks about, by which God brings us his word and the sacraments, means by which God saves us. Now, the implications for Concordia about the doctrine of two kingdoms are these two things. First of all, it's important to recognize that Christians are citizens of both kingdoms, according to Luther. Luther identifies that Christians are put in families, are subjects of governments, they're citizens, they're part of economic systems, and they have responsibilities to be good citizens and be involved in those institutions to help preserve this world. Christians also, as members of the church, are citizens of the kingdom of the right. And in a sense, Concordia University, Wisconsin is an institution whose mission straddles those two kingdoms. It certainly is an institution of higher education where we prepare people for service, for different professions, for life. And it is our goal, it is our responsibility to provide excellent education. At the same time, Concordia University, Wisconsin is an institution of the kingdom of the right. While not a church, Concordia is owned and operated by the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. It is an institution of the church whose goal is to provide access to God's redemptive work wherever possible. Let's turn now to the doctrine of vocation. A good simple definition is the word calling, that God calls us to service in this world in different ways. And especially our role as Christians, the Christian concept of vocation is that God calls us to be his hands and his feet and sometimes his voice in service to other people. One writer, a gentleman by the name of Frederick Buechner, describes vocation in this way, and I like this definition. The place that God calls you is where your deep gladness and the world's deep need meet. Vocation gives meaning to life. But I also want to add a particularly Lutheran emphasis to the idea of vocation. Luther identified that we as Christians have many vocations. God provides for us the opportunity to serve others in many different ways. And certainly that is true in our professional callings, that God can call us to serve as physical therapists, as business people, as pharmacists, as historians, as educators. But at the same time, God calls us to be parents and spouses and children and citizens and people in an economic system. And in all of those different ways, God calls us to serve others in order to help his world. Another document that helps to give a sense of Concordia's institutional stance about faith and learning is its vision statement. This vision statement was developed administratively and accepted by the faculty in 2005. Let me read that to you. Concordia University, Wisconsin will be known nationally and internationally as a premier Lutheran Christian university, widely recognized for meaningful integration of faith and learning. Concordia University, Wisconsin alumni will assume significant servant leadership responsibilities in the church and communities across the nation and around the world. The difference between a mission statement and a vision statement is a mission statement attempts to give us all a sense of what the institution is at this particular moment. The vision statement gives us an aspiration. What do we want Concordia University to look like, in essence, when it grows up? And I think our vision statement gives us three important aspirations regarding faith and learning. First of all, it gives us the aspiration of excellence. The vision statement identifies that we want to be a premier Lutheran university. That's with particular Lutheran humbleness, not the premier Lutheran university, but a premier Lutheran university. But this vision statement calls us to excellence. In our vocation, we need to provide excellent education. Second of all, the vision statement calls us toward meaningful integration of faith and learning, not something on the surface, not something for show, but something that adds to our students' understanding of the world and themselves. And then finally, the vision statement calls us to prepare people for servant leadership. Our alums, we will know that we have done our jobs when our alumni assume those servant leader positions both in the church and in communities around the world. Well, how does the institution attempt to meet this vision at this point? We certainly are not perfect by any means, and we are continually working to better our academic programs, and the process of integrating faith and learning is an ongoing process. But let me just give you a couple of ways in which we're attempting to meet the aspirations of the vision statement. Concordia still prepares people for church work. Here in the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, we prepare young men to go to the seminary. We prepare young men and women for the teaching ministry and lay ministry and other church music opportunities. A significant percentage of our traditional undergrad students do prepare for full-time church work. Second of all, Concordia hires Christians to teach its students. We've broadened our base of teachers. We used to hire only Lutherans, but we do hire Christians who are then able to share their faith with their students as appropriate. All undergraduates take 9 credits of theology at Concordia. That's a pretty significant load. Nevertheless, we believe that is very important in that holistic way of understanding the world that we promote, that our students have the opportunity to explore that spiritual side, that faith-related side of their education. And I want to let you know that Concordia's plenary faculty, their full-time faculty, are working on university-wide learning outcomes for all CUW students, outcomes that most likely will include some aspect of integration of faith and learning across the board at whatever degree and whatever format that we have, that we let students know that is an important part of our educational experience here at Concordia. But we know that the key to doing this well is, and the key to providing a significant, a useful Concordia education that looks at faith and learning, that the key to that is the instructor. That's where the real work takes place at Concordia between teachers and students. And I would posit that the first question that you as instructors need to ask, well, there are really two questions as as you think about teaching and learning in the classes that you are going to teach, that you're going to lead. The first question is, how does my Christian faith inform my profession, my discipline? I want you to think about how your faith has shaped or molded the way that you think about your discipline and the way you practice your discipline. And then that next question will be, how will your Christian faith shape and inform and mold your teaching? I want to assure you there is no set template. This is not a science. This is more of an art. And to tell the truth, it is more process than goal. No one here at Concordia has this figured out by any means. There's not a checklist for us to work this out. Just as teaching and learning are in great part an art, the integration of one's faith into the learning process and that discussion about faith is very much of an art. It is also true that one's own Christian perspective brings unique and distinctive ideas and perspectives in teaching and learning. One of the advantages that we've discovered in broadening our teacher base to inviting Christians of all different denominations to our community is that we have learned that people of different denominations and different understandings about Christianity have brought a fuller, more complete understanding of faith and learning, different perspectives, which have been very helpful to our community. To help you think about these questions about how does my Christian faith inform my discipline and how does it inform my thinking, I'd like to posit 3 different ways in which you as a teacher could think about connecting faith and learning in your classroom. And I'll be talking about the instructor as an example, the instructor as a witness, and the instructor as a scholar. Let's start with the Christian as an example. Most often, Christians witness by their examples, and we at Concordia have the opportunity to provide those examples or those role models in our classrooms to our students. There are many different ways that we can role model our Christian faith and our Christian beliefs in the classroom, and I'd just like to explain 3. First is, I believe, an understanding that we as Christians have to have a sense of humility toward our discipline. One very basic Christian belief is the understanding that humans are both imperfect and limited in their understanding. Because of both that limit that limited understanding and our imperfect understanding, I believe Christians have a very useful stance toward education. Education is not necessarily something that I, as the instructor, know all, and I'm going to impart all of my wisdom to students, and they're just going to soak it up. That is not a very it's not a very useful understanding of education. Rather, an invitation for instructor and students to learn together a discipline. Obviously, instructors have more knowledge and have a better understanding of the discipline that you're presenting. Nevertheless, that opportunity, that humility toward one's discipline allows you to invite students into the discussion, invites questions, invites challenging, invites meaningful and useful interaction between students and professors. A second understanding of witness would be the Christian respect for all creation, including for all humans. The recognition that instructors have that the students that they have in their classes are human beings created by God with different gifts, with some better equipped than others, but all with valid value, and all have worth in the eyes of God. All of our students are ones whom we should work with and serve by teaching them. That doesn't mean lowering standards, but it does mean providing opportunities for our students to succeed. And then finally, I think a third opportunity would be for the use of prayer in the classroom as appropriate. There is no set way that instructors are to pray or not to pray. We know students pray very often, especially before tests. But it is okay for, and sometimes very appropriate for professors to lift up their students, either in class, online, where necessary. It also is appropriate to encourage students to pray for each other. A second way in which instructors can connect faith and learning in the classroom is to think about the Christian instructor as a witness. Christ calls us as Christians to be witnesses. That is part of our role as Christians, as citizens of the kingdom of the right. And it is entirely appropriate for instructors to witness to their faith where appropriate in the classroom. Of course, the classroom, in recognizing the wide variety of students who might be of many different Christian faiths, of other faiths, or of no faith, we need to be respectful of our students and their beliefs, but appropriate witnessing makes sense. Use of the idea of vocation is a very easy entree into witness. The idea that as a professional business person, one can not only make money, but one can serve one's neighbor by providing services, etc. Healthcare, or education also provides opportunities for instructors to talk about the idea of vocation. And certainly the idea of servant leadership is a great entree into witness those types of appropriate discussions within the context of the learning in the classroom. And then finally, I believe that the Christian instructor has an opportunity to explore ideas from a particularly Christian perspective. That's not to say that there's a Christian math as compared to a non-Christian math. 2 + 2 = 4, whether one is a Christian or not. But Christians can bring, I think, very valid and worthwhile discussions into the classroom that help to expand the ways that students look at their world. The Christian instructor as a scholar often thinks about those big questions that are asked out there. Often sort of the guts of the discipline, as I mentioned before, are not necessarily, you don't want to try to force Bible passages into equations or that type of thing. But raising the big questions for our students offers the opportunity to think about the discipline, the profession, the topic from a Christian perspective. And let me just give you a couple of areas where those things might work. With the Christian belief and doctrine in creation, the understanding that God made the world and that it makes sense, it is orderly, it can be understood, it has an aesthetic beauty to it, provides opportunities for discussions about those big questions in any number of disciplines like the sciences or the arts or even the professions. The use of paradox, I think, is a very useful concept that Christian scholars can make very good use of. The idea that the world is not always a black and white, a yes or no, a right or wrong world, that sometimes the answers to questions are that they're both and. As a historian, I use the example often that while Adolf Hitler was a really bad guy, he loved his dogs. So how can such a bad guy, I mean, even though he was in many ways evil incarnate, there was some sense of good about him. So he wasn't completely evil with no sense of good. Adolf Hitler is not a yes or no or a right or wrong or evil or good person. There was a combination of that. Christianity and Christian understanding of the world allows us to look at the world in that broader, I think, fuller sense. So, for example, the human condition. God made humans as perfect, as individuals with souls, with aspirations toward good, and yet original sin. With sin, we do not live up to those aspirations. So humans are that combination of good and evil that we all have to struggle with. Another area that paradox can be useful is the concept of knowing. It is true that Christianity emphasizes the idea of objective truth, There is truth outside of what outside of our feelings that is correct. The Ten Commandments give an example of that. And at the same time, because of our limitations, our intellectual limitations, our limitations on the knowledge of God, we have to recognize a humility toward knowing. That paradox of, yes, we understand that there is objective truth, that there is truth, but we don't always get to know that. Often, especially for many professional programs, Christian discussions about Christian values and Christian truth can come up in ethical discussions. That is a very valid way in which Christian instructors can raise issues of faith and learning in their classrooms. Well, I've given you probably enough to think about at this point in time. I appreciate your time. I appreciate your willingness to go through our orientation. I am always willing to be in discussions about this opportunity that you have in teaching. If there's anything that I can do to help you in your preparations or in your teachings, please don't hesitate to contact me. God's blessings on your work here at Concordia. We really appreciate the time and the effort and the work that you put toward teaching our students. Thank you very much.